In the cold, clinical language of federal investigations, there is no higher alarm than the Type A mishap. It is a classification reserved for the worst-case scenarios: total mission failure, loss of a spacecraft, or catastrophic threat to human life. For decades, this label was associated with the darkest days of NASA: the smoke over Florida in 1986 and the debris over Texas in 2003. But in February 2026, the silence was broken. NASA officially classified the Boeing Starliner's crewed flight test as a Type A mishap, placing it in the same league as the Challenger and Columbia disasters. This isn't just about a broken valve or a leaking pipe. This is an official admission that the United States nearly lost two of its most experienced astronauts to a series of cascading failures that should never have happened. When Starliner approached the International Space Station in 2024, it wasn't just a technical glitch, it was a total breakdown of controlled flight. 5 critical thrusters simply died. The spacecraft, designed to be the pinnacle of American engineering, became a drifting $3 billion liability in the vacuum of space. But as the independent program investigation team revealed in their 300-page report, the hardware was just a symptom of a much deeper rot. NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman recently delivered a scathing rebuke that sent shockwaves through the industry. He stated that while the engineering deficiencies were real, the most troubling failure was a complete collapse of leadership and a culture of mistrust. For years, Boeing and NASA leadership allegedly ignored warning signs, treating thruster failures on previous uncrewed flights as isolated anomalies rather than systemic death traps. The investigation uncovered a toxic environment where safety engineers were reportedly berated and silenced during high-stakes meetings. Schedule pressure and the desperate need for a second commercial provider led to a culture where programmatic advocacy exceeded reasonable bounds. In short, they wanted a success so badly that they were willing to overlook the risk of a terrible day on orbit. While SpaceX's Dragon has become the reliable workhorse of the orbital economy, Boeing, the titan of the 20th century, has delivered a vehicle that NASA now admits was inconsistent with human spaceflight safety standards from its inception. The world watched as Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams were left stranded on the ISS for months, eventually forced to wait for a SpaceX taxi to bring them home. But the real story isn't about the wait, it's about the fact that the American dream of space exploration is currently being held together by a single company, while its oldest partner, Boeing, has been formally declared a risk to the very people it was built to protect. The throne of the heavens is vacant, and as America grapples with its own internal decay, a new power is watching from across the Pacific, ready to prove that their vertical isn't just more efficient, it's more stable. If you want to understand how the balance of power in the solar system is shifting and discover the secret technologies that are making the old giants look like relics, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. We are just beginning to peel back the layers of a crisis that will define the next decade of space travel. If you want to understand how a $3 billion spacecraft becomes a floating coffin, you have to look at the doghouses. These are the 4 propulsion pods surrounding the Starliner, housing the critical thrusters needed for docking. During the 2024 mission, these doghouses didn't just malfunction, they literally began to cook themselves. The independent investigation revealed that Boeing's design allowed heat to build up so intensely that the internal Teflon seals, the very components meant to regulate fuel flow, began to swell and extrude like molten plastic. This physical deformation choked the oxidizer flow, starving the engines of their lifeblood. But here is where it gets truly terrifying. The hardware failure was compounded by a catastrophic lack of systems intelligence. When the thrusters began to struggle, the Starliner's fault detection software, the brain of the ship, didn't try to save them. Instead, it interpreted the sluggish performance as a total failure and permanently locked the engines out. The software was effectively sabotaging the mission to protect a system that was already failing. At the most critical moment of docking, the crew was left with a spacecraft that was actively deciding to shut down its own maneuvering capability. Then there was the helium. Before the rocket even left the pad in Florida, engineers knew about a leak. They called it stable and manageable. But once in orbit, the stable leak turned into a flood. 7 out of the 8 helium manifolds began to bleed pressure. The cause? A fundamental material incompatibility. Boeing had used seals that were literally being eaten away by the nitrogen tetroxide oxidizer, a mistake so basic it should have been caught in a freshman engineering lab. The report highlights a qualification gap that is staggering for a company of Boeing's stature. They didn't conduct all-up integrated testing of the propulsion system under realistic thermal loads. They relied on computer models that were optimistic, rather than reality that was harsh. This wasn't a glitch, it was a failure of the scientific method. While NASA pushed for a second provider to ensure redundancy, they inadvertently created a system where Boeing was allowed to grade its own homework. The result was a vehicle that lacked the required 2 fault tolerance for its deorbit burn, the most dangerous maneuver of the mission. If one more system had failed during the return, there would have been no way to bring the ship back to Earth. NASA eventually realized they weren't looking at a minor setback, they were looking at a design that was fundamentally unsound. And as the American space program stands paralyzed by these revelations, the global gaze is shifting. Because while Boeing's engineers were arguing in meetings, another nation was quietly perfecting a design that doesn't just work, it evolves. If you're finding this deep dive into the hidden failures of the space race fascinating, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. We're about to move from the wreckage of the American giant to the rising power that is ready to fill the vacuum. You don't want to miss what comes next. While Boeing's engineers were locked in endless debates with NASA over leaking seals and malfunctioning code, another giant was moving with predatory precision. In late 2025, the China National Space Administration, CNSA, unveiled the first flight-ready model of the Mengzhou, the Dream vessel. This is not just another orbital capsule, it is the physical manifestation of China's 2026 strategic pivot. While the West is struggling to fix 20-year-old designs, China has skipped an entire generation of technology to create a modular, deep space-ready vehicle that makes the Starliner look like a relic of the Cold War. The Mengzhou is built on a philosophy that is the polar opposite of the Boeing culture revealed in the NASA Type A report. Instead of fragmented subcontractors and misaligned management, China uses what they call the integrated state mandate. Every component, from the carbon fiber heat shield to the high-pressure propulsion system, is developed under a unified digital twin architecture. This means that before a single bolt was tightened, the Mengzhou had already flown millions of virtual missions. Unlike the Starliner, which was crippled by unexpected thermal loads, the Chinese vessel was designed specifically to handle the extreme temperature swings of long-duration missions to the moon and beyond. But the most devastating blow to American dominance is the Mengzhou's propulsion system. While Boeing struggled with toxic material incompatibilities and swelling Teflon, Chinese engineers at the Academy of Aerospace Propulsion Technology implemented a revolutionary integrated bipropellant system. It utilizes 3D-printed ceramic metal nozzles that are immune to the corrosive effects of nitrogen tetroxide. The result? A spacecraft that doesn't leak, doesn't overheat, and, most importantly, doesn't need to be rescued by a competitor. In early 2026, secret orbital tests of the Mengzhou's autonomous docking system demonstrated a level of precision that NASA engineers found disturbing. The Chinese AI pilot performed a docking sequence with the Tiangong space station in less than 2 hours, a fraction of the time required by Western craft. This isn't just a matter of speed, it's a matter of reliability. China's fault-tolerant software is designed to keep thrusters alive at all costs, unlike Boeing's FDIR system, which actively shut down its own maneuvering power during the 2024 crisis. The contrast is undeniable. In 2026, the United States is essentially running a monoculture in space, relying entirely on SpaceX because its legacy partners have failed. Meanwhile, China has built a redundant, state-backed fleet that is launching with a frequency that is starting to overwhelm global tracking systems. The Dream vessel isn't just a ship, it is a signal to the world that the era of American orbital hegemony is over. The Red Dragon didn't just catch up, it waited for the giant to trip over its own bureaucracy, and now it is stepping over the wreckage. The formal classification of the Starliner as a Type A mishap in early 2026 was the final nail in the coffin of a 20th century myth. For decades, the world believed that American aerospace was an unstoppable juggernaut, protected by a firewall of superior management and engineering rigor. But the 2026 report has exposed a terrifying reality. The firewall has been breached from within. As Boeing announces the layoff of over 17,000 employees and struggles to survive a mounting financial collapse, NASA's commercial crew dream of having two independent American providers has effectively turned into a monopoly. Today, NASA is more dependent on SpaceX than it has ever been on a single private entity. This monoculture is a dangerous gamble. If a single Falcon 9 rocket experiences a technical grounding in late 2026, the United States will be completely locked out of the International Space Station, forced to beg for seats on Russian Soyuz rockets or worse. And this is exactly the opening that China National Space Administration has been waiting for. As the American program retreats into damage control and bureaucratic restructuring, China is aggressively filling the vacuum. The maiden flight of the Mengzhou in 2026 isn't just a test, it is an invitation. Beijing has already begun offering orbital partnerships to nations that were previously aligned with the West. With a reliable, state-backed vehicle and a rapidly expanding Tiangong station, China is positioning itself as the new, stable alternative to the chaotic, profit-driven model of the American giants. In 2026, for the first time in history, we are witnessing the Great Swap, the moment when the Global South and even some European partners begin to look east for their ticket to the stars. The race to the moon has also shifted. While NASA's Artemis mission, scheduled for February 2026, will only loop around the moon without landing, China is already testing the lunar-capable versions of the Mengzhou and the Long March 10A rocket. They aren't just aiming for a flag, they're building a sustainable supply chain that doesn't rely on the efficiencies of a failing corporation like Boeing. The Starliner verdict is more than a technical report, it is a eulogy for an era. The stars don't care about legacy and they don't care about billion-dollar brands. They belong to the cultures that can maintain technical excellence and clear-eyed leadership. As Boeing's factories fall silent and the silver gliders of the Mengzhou take to the skies, the message to the world is clear. The high ground has been lost. The future of human spaceflight is no longer being written in Seattle or Florida. It is being coded in the high-tech hubs of China, where the dream vessel is fast becoming a reality. The American century in space may have just come to an end, not with a bang, but with the hiss of a leaking valve and the silence of a boardroom that forgot how to lead.